learning to treat my body like a car, like a machine. When you do a cold start, let everything warm up, come up to temperature, and don't put the pedal to the metal before things have warmed up, because those little pains and things are there for a reason. Last night in the dark I could barely make out these signs, and when I saw one I couldn't tell the direction of the arrow, so I'd come up and run my finger through to figure out which way to go. It's pretty creative. There was one other guy in my I got together last night, a French guy, and we had a bit of a chat this morning. He's a fairly interesting character. We were both on the same page about the state of the world. The state of the world is in a pretty big mess right now. I've been reading Ray Dalio's The New World Order, which you can find on principles.com. I find that very enlightening, reading from a guy who knows an awful lot more than I do about these topics. He talks a lot about short-term debt cycles, long-term debt cycles, and ultimately what happens at the end of those debt cycles. The short-term debt cycle is like once every 7 to 10 years, and you see market corrections when people get a little too greedy, a bit too much debt, and then there's a correction. Maybe the house prices take a bit of a hit, the stock market takes a bit of a hit, and the economy as a whole takes a bit of a hit. Then there's the long-term debt cycle, which is more talking about sort of countries where over a period of time whole countries can get quite riddled with debt, and eventually or even empires, probably said better, can get too much debt, and eventually the bubble bursts and there's a changing of the guard. So there was the British Empire, then the American Empire, and now the Chinese Empire. We're also talking about the banking system in Europe and how it has, this French guy thought that it had quite mafia-esque tendencies, and I'd been thinking about the banking system on this walk. Actually, I never got around to talking about it, but banking system, like being a bank, is literally a license to print money. I'm thinking about starting a bank. Like, it's so easy. Basically, people come to you with their money, and whatever money they give you, you can literally create money in the form of debt and give that to other people so that they can build houses, buy things, buy cars, credit cards that they shouldn't be putting debt on, but some of the central banks in the world have a negative interest rate. So for example, in Europe, the central bank rate is the Euribor, and that's negative. So that means that the central bank is paying the banks money for every single euro that they've loaned out. So as a bank, you know, I'm Mr. National Australia Bank, I'm Mr. Santander, yeah, I'm Mr. Barclays. I'm getting interest from my customers who have a home loan, and I'm getting interest payments from the central bank. Not a bad little business. I can't really see the downside. So, you know, I could buy myself a nice suit, sit in a fancy office, and not do anything, thus annoying my customers, and introduce annoying fees and charges to further annoy them. I mean, how hard can it be? So, seems like probably it is a little hard, because probably to get the banking licenses, etc., not so easy. And that's where it probably comes down a little bit to who you know, as does everything in this world. And my French friend would tell me that can be possibly a little bit corrupt. You know you're in Spain when they have olive oil bins. Staying centered. What does it mean to stay centered? Well, glad you asked. So, I was just thinking about when I used to do rallying. Sometimes, like, you'd be driving, you felt totally centered, like comfortable, apart it, like one with the car, or car, so I should say, right accent, and peaceful, didn't feel afraid, and you were just doing the actions. Other times, maybe you cut a corner, maybe you take a risk, maybe you somehow go outside yourself, and sometimes you get away with that, sometimes you don't. The same concept applies in a social setting. Maybe you're with a group of strangers or with people you know, and you're sitting around a dinner table having a chat, and you know, maybe you're making some jokes, maybe you're talking about some deep topics. When you feel like you're centered in yourself, normally things are going to go well, they're going to be okay, and have a fun night. When you go outside of yourself, maybe get angry, maybe your ego grabs hold of you and wants to make a point. That's when things start to get a little squirrely, a little sideways. It applies in so many things in life, even crossing the road. When you cross the road, it's funny, I've noticed in Spain that, you know, places like China, Spain, there's more of a culture than pushing in than other places like Australia or England. I have noticed that sometimes people will throw you off your guard. You might be crossing the road, a busy traffic light crossing, and there's a bunch of other people, tourists or whatever, coming the other way, and one will kind of go in your direction. If you aren't centered, you'll like take a step to the side, maybe the other side, and it'll become a little awkward. If you're centered, they'll move. It's weird, but try it. Yeah, so sounds like staying centered is a good thing. It's also a very good thing in relationships. Maybe you are going through a difficult time, not so easy to do, or maybe you're at the start of a relationship and you're very nervous. Staying centered, very, very worthwhile thing to check out. And how do you stay centered? Well, first of all, you need to develop the feeling. First of all, you need to be aware of this concept, which you probably won't be after listening to this, but maybe after stewing on it some time, thinking, okay, maybe that Australian with the pilgrim's hat, maybe he has a point. I might think about this a bit. At a certain point, you develop an awareness. That's the first thing. Then, once you develop that awareness, it's something you can test out. It's the second thing. So it's like developing the feeling for where you are, and that's always moving. Think of like a table with a bowling ball on it. Maybe something a little lighter. Maybe like a ball bearing on a little flat board, and you're trying to balance that. So it's always moving. You can't really control it. But let's say possibly with some spiritual practices, meditation, praying, you develop more of that sense. So the flat surface becomes more concave, becomes a little bit easier to stay in the center over time. The more hours you spend praying or meditating, you know, that's slowly becoming more concave. Then you stop and it slowly goes back to flat. And then you do you know, a whole bunch of bad stuff. You do things that go against your own principles, and it becomes convex. Can't really do that with my hand. So convex, that's the best I can do. And then you quit that shit, quit that stuff, and you go back to sort of flat, and then you're getting back into your praying, meditation, and you're becoming more convex. The ball is easier to stay centered when it's convex, quite challenging when it's flat, and almost bloody impossible when it's I meant concave. It's very easy when it's concave. When it's flat, quite challenging, almost impossible when it's convex. And the other thing is, you know, this staying centered, the ball is dynamic. It's constantly moving, as is the board. Okay, it's not as dynamic. It's not changing shape as rapidly, but it is over time. And it's not linear. The rate at which it changes, it's exponential. So the more time you put into good stuff, the faster there's that compounding effect. The more time you put into stuff which is against your values, your principles, you know, it's getting way more difficult to balance that ball. I can see the sea in the distance. The first time since I left the Mediterranean in Barcelona. I haven't seen it once. I've walked to the other side of Spain now and I can see the sea. That's epic. And not just the sea, the ocean. The name Finisterre seems to be derived from finis, which is finish, and terra, like land. So the end of the land. In old times it was effectively the end of the world. I don't know why, but Galician dogs are much more mean than any of the other dogs in Spain. Not sure if it's something to do with the people or their owners. Wow. After nearly 900 kilometers, it's time to take off the shoes. yeah. That's chilly. For me, this walk to Finisterre has somehow been a slow coming back to reality. My thoughts have started to think towards the future and what's next, which brings some frustrations and triggers a few things in me, but all will be well. Vaseline and sand make a good combination. Pretty epic to think that near that big mountain you can see the windmills. That's where I was walking from earlier on today, and when I first thought I'd seen Finisterre, turns out I hadn't. Maybe I had. Yeah, it's definitely a while to go. Quick shower and off to the lighthouse to watch the sunset. So I'm sitting here at the end of the world. Stunningly beautiful place.